When Caroline first laid eyes on Blackwood Manor, it was like stepping into a dream. The sprawling estate, with its ivy-covered walls and towering gables, seemed to emerge from the mist as if from a storybook. After a tumultuous year marked by heartbreak and loss, inheriting the manor felt like a lifeline, a chance to leave her troubled past behind and start anew. The locals, however, did not share her enthusiasm. "That place is cursed," warned the grocer, an elderly man with deep lines etched into his face. "Everyone who lives there, they either go mad or disappear." Caroline brushed off his words as small-town superstition, the kind of folklore that clings to old, abandoned places. She was determined to make Blackwood Manor her sanctuary, a place to heal and rebuild her life. With her belongings in tow and a heart full of cautious optimism, she moved in on a misty October afternoon. The house was every bit as grand as she'd imagined, though time and neglect had taken their toll. Dust blanketed the antique furniture, cobwebs clung to the ornate chandeliers, and the air carried a faint, musty odor. Still, Caroline felt a strange connection to the place, as if it had been waiting for her. Her first night in the manor passed uneventfully, though she found the silence unnerving. The countryside was far removed from the constant hum of the city, and the stillness seemed almost oppressive. As she lay in bed, the weight of the house pressed down on her, making her feel small and vulnerable. It was the second night when she first heard the screams. They came suddenly, faint but unmistakable, echoing through the darkened halls. Caroline bolted upright, her heart pounding. She strained her ears, but the sound had already faded. Dismissing it as a figment of her imagination, she forced herself to go back to sleep. But the screams returned. Night after night, they grew louder and more anguished, reverberating through the manor like the cries of a wounded animal. Caroline's initial fear gave way to curiosity. She began exploring the house during the day, searching for the source of the sounds. It was during one of these explorations that she stumbled upon the study. The room was tucked away at the end of a long, shadowy corridor. Inside, she found stacks of yellowed newspapers, faded photographs, and an old leather-bound journal. As she sifted through the items, a chilling story began to unfold. Decades ago, Blackwood Manor had been the site of a gruesome family massacre. The details were sparse, but the journal hinted at dark rituals, a child's disappearance, and whispers of an unspeakable force that had claimed the house as its own. Caroline's hands trembled as she read the final entry. "The screams will not stop. They're warning us. Something is coming. Something is here." That night, the dreams began. Caroline found herself wandering the halls of the manor in her sleep, her footsteps echoing against the cold stone floors. Her dreams were vivid and haunting, filled with shadowy figures and a blood-soaked child who stared at her with hollow eyes. The child never spoke, but his presence filled her with a sense of dread so profound it left her gasping for air when she woke. As the days turned into weeks, the house seemed to come alive. Shadows moved where there was no light, doors creaked open on their own, and cold spots appeared in the warmest rooms. Caroline felt the weight of unseen eyes on her at all times. The screams grew louder, now accompanied by whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The whispers were not random. They spoke in fragmented sentences, warning her to leave, to run before it was too late. But Caroline's curiosity outweighed her fear. She began piecing together the history of the manor, poring over the journal and the records she'd found. The previous owners, all of whom had met tragic ends, had reported similar phenomena: the screams, the shadows, the feeling of being watched. Through her research, Caroline uncovered the truth about the child in her dreams. His name was Thomas Blackwood, the youngest son of the manor's original owners. He had been the sole survivor of the massacre, though he disappeared shortly after. Local legend claimed that Thomas had been taken by the entity that haunted the house, a sinister force bound to the manor by an ancient ritual gone wrong. The more Caroline learned, the more dangerous the house became. The whispers turned into screams, echoing through the halls at all hours. The shadows grew bolder, darting across her peripheral vision and brushing against her skin. The blood-soaked child began appearing not only in her dreams but also in the waking hours, standing at the foot of her bed or peering around corners. One evening, as Caroline sat in the study, the journal opened before her, the temperature in the room plummeted. Her breath fogged in the air, and the pages of the journal began to flip on their own. A single word appeared, scrawled in blood-red ink. Leave. Terrified, Caroline tried to flee the house, but the doors refused to budge. The windows, once fragile with age, now seemed impenetrable. The manor had trapped her, its walls pulsing with a malevolent energy that grew stronger with each passing moment. It was then that she realized the spirits were not her enemies. The screams, the warnings, they were trying to protect her. They wanted her to leave, to escape the fate that had claimed so many before her. But the entity, the true master of the house, would not let her go so easily. Desperate, Caroline turned to the journal for guidance. Among the cryptic entries, she found a ritual meant to banish the entity. The instructions were incomplete, but it was her only hope. Gathering the materials listed, candles, salt, and a dagger, she prepared herself for the confrontation. As the blood moon rose that night, casting an eerie red glow over the manor, Caroline began the ritual. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and the walls trembled as the entity manifested before her. It was a towering, shadowy figure, its form constantly shifting, its hollow eyes fixed on her. The spirits of the house rallied around her, their ghostly forms shielding her from the entity's wrath. With trembling hands, Caroline recited the incantation, her voice barely audible over the cacophony of screams and roars. The entity lashed out, its tendrils of darkness slicing through the air, but the spirits held firm, giving Caroline the time she needed. As she drove the dagger into the center of the salt circle, a blinding light filled the room. The entity let out an unearthly wail before collapsing in on itself, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The spirits, their task complete, faded one by one, their anguished screams replaced by a profound sense of peace. Exhausted and shaken, Caroline stumbled out of the manor as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon. She looked back one last time, the house now silent and still, its windows reflecting the morning light. Though she had survived, she knew the manor would never truly be free of its darkness. It would wait, as it always had, for the next soul brave enough, or foolish enough, to call it home. Years later, Caroline would write a book about her time in Blackwood Manor. The Silent Scream of Blackwood became a bestseller, capturing the imaginations of readers around the world. But no matter how many people praised her story, Caroline knew that the true horrors of the manor could never be fully conveyed in words. On quiet nights, when the wind howled and the shadows seemed to stretch a little too far, she would still hear the faint echo of a scream, reminding her of what she had left behind. Yet the story did not end with Caroline. Decades later, a new family moved into Blackwood Manor, lured by the same promise of beauty and a fresh start. They laughed off the warnings of locals and saw the house not as a cursed relic, but as a chance to build their dreams. But on their first night, the youngest daughter, Sophie, woke to the sound of faint, anguished screams echoing through the halls.